Hey, MBA hopefuls, and welcome to MBA Waves. We are on the air. MBA Waves talks all things business and education. We are streaming live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook every single Tuesday, and you can get our schedule at mbawaves.com. Today, we're talking about networking with class. It's episode 91, and we're going to get into things like leveraging relationships, business cards or not, and how to make it a win-win. So to get us started off, let's just set the stage here. I mean, networking is not just corporate cocktails with branded toasts and business cards, except when it is. So networking can come in so many different shapes and sizes and forms. And with me, as usual, today are my two co-hosts of MBA Waves, Bara and Krithika. How you doing, guys?
I'm doing great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it snowed here. It's really snowy. That's a good networking tip, right? We talk about the weather. Have a good start.
Nice.
And to make small talk. So weather-wise here, it's not bad. We're getting into spring and I think early summer.
Wow, that sounds so good.
It's coming, guys. It's coming. Looking forward to daylight savings time. Anyway, yeah, a lot of people feel really uncomfortable networking for a variety of reasons. Sometimes the idea for some people sounds like a super fun time, and for other people, like drives fear into the hearts of men and women. And one thing that I've heard that kind of rings a bell, that kind of resonates with me, if networking feels kind of sleazy or creepy, you're probably doing it wrong. And that's what we're going to talk about today, how to go about it and do it right, no matter what your level of comfort with other people are. If you're more introvert, extrovert, doesn't matter. This is a skill that can be learned and trained, and business schools really look for it. They look for it first at MBA fairs. They look for it at, when you're visiting campus, during your interview, your ease and ability to talk to people, to connect. And, it's a strong soft skill, an important soft skill, I should say, for anyone. And of course, that's something they're also going to train you on, so you're even more comfortable and can be even better at it. And so when you're actually at the point where you're looking for a job, post-MBA or post-masters, whatever it may be, you'll be a superstar. So we're here to give you a head start today on MBA Waves. Krithika, did you want to kick us off with any question or?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm going to ask you, Eric, since you've been on the other side of the AdCom and on the AdCom actually. So how do you actually network with class? How does that look like?
Well, I mean, that's pretty broad, as the title might suggest of the episode. But for me, it's about being prepared. Just a few small steps that you take can make you be really prepared and have a huge impact. And I think when you're prepared, you're more comfortable. You can speak with confidence, make eye contact, smile, and you're armed with things to say. You've prepared a couple of things about yourself that you can share, that you come off smooth and classy. To sum it up.
Bara, what would you add?
Well, I first want to say that I really enjoy networking. I really enjoy meeting new people. COVID has changed me a little bit. I've become like a really proficient introvert, but I do have an extroverted aspect to my personality. And so I'm super excited to meet people. And because we often talk about business school being leadership school, leadership is really about building relationships and trust between people. And so I think that, like Eric said, that having some kind of things ready to talk about, whether it's the weather or something interesting about the area that you're in, it doesn't have to all be business, right? You're really kind of creating a foundation of where you can meet someone else. We've often talked on MBA Waves about ways that you can learn about the people that you're talking to. So if you're going to a certain event, whether it's an MBA event or it's a work event or a job event, it's really understanding, like, who are you going to be talking about, and listening, right? Listening to me is one of the most important pieces. It's not just about putting out information, but really being present, having empathy, compassion, and having that good timing, not trying to think ahead, but how do you get yourself to a place where you can be super present and self-aware. But I think that's how I usually network the most, is both listening, and I try to keep things light, generally speaking.
Bara, I mean, first of all, you're a natural extrovert, even though you may have your introvert side, and that's been developing in me as well as I get older, maybe since COVID, whatever. And definitely you're good at talking, you're at ease, and you're a great listener. So all those things. But you spoke about a few other things I want to push you a little bit on to maybe like develop the idea. Like we talk about like empathy and compassion and all those kind of things. What does that exactly mean? Like being an active listener, like how would you define that a little bit more clearly so people can actually take a step in that direction?
Yeah, similar to, it's funny because similar to studying for a standardized test, I think that being an active listener is really being present in the moment, right? You don't want to think about what you said before. You don't want to think about what you're going to say going in the future, but really what the person talks about, and really seeing if there's a way to actually marry what they're saying with what you're doing there, or what's your purpose of being there, right? What is the point of what it is that you're doing, whether that, if it is an MBA fair, it's about going to be the school or the location or understanding the professor's work or what kinds of office hours they have. Like what are the things that you want to find out? And then what's the route that you're going to get there, and listening to the cues of what might actually be the least effort to get you to finding out the information that you want to find, and also building a kind of warmth between you and the person that you're talking to, right? Even if you are someone who's more distant or more thoughtful, like I think that I can sort of be a little bull in a china shop-ish, but I can be self-reflective about, whoops, didn't mean to overstep my boundaries there, or oops, that's TMI. Like I'm like the way that maybe it's not classy, but I think I've developed understanding who I am, so that I want to always be listening for what the other person's, not their pain points, but what are they looking for? It's not just about what I want, but what are they looking for in their communication with me, and how can I make it really easy for them in delivering what it is that they hope to learn about me, but having it not all be about me at the same time.
I think what you're talking about is also like watching for cues. Like when you're speaking to somebody, you can see their face. Are they reacting positively or negatively to what you're saying? Are they like doing this, like they get it? Or are they doing like this, like get on with it? And that'll give the cue to you to either speed up, change the subject, go deeper, whatever it may be. But reading your audience, reading the room is a really good skill to develop.
Yeah, and I love the fact, that Bara about here about the cadence, and it's like kind of like a conversation between two people, the connection that you're looking for. And one thing I truly say that when someone is networking with class, they don't go in with an agenda saying that, hey, I'm just going to say hi, the weather's amazing, and then I'm going to say like, hey, can I get the job, or can I like, can you tell me about this, how do I get into your school, that kind of thing. So as Bara said, it's about building that warmth and connection before even I think even treading the waters to see if you would want to ask such questions. So that to me would symbolize networking with class.
It's interesting because I think LinkedIn is such an amazing place to network with people. And I notice how people do it right and wrong. And, sometimes people will say, hey, I read the article that you wrote. And I'm like, oh, well, what was interesting to you about it? Right? Because I know that they're using sort of a canned approach to reaching out to me. And I don't think that's classy. So, I'm usually like, oh, great. So tell me like, what about that? If I have time, because usually if I don't have time, I don't want to really engage, but I do find that even networking on social media platforms has that cadence or lack thereof. Right. And so how do you approach someone, even when it's not a professional networking event, but you're going someplace where it might be good to meet people, right? It's still a potential opportunity to network, but being too eager and too hungry and not being in the moment really kind of creates a false sense of it just feels put on. How can you be natural, curious, present, and yourself, assured, confident? How do you create a good impression, and how do you help someone else to create a good impression? How do you create a comfortable place for the other person? Right. So maybe I'm contradicting myself, because sometimes on LinkedIn, I kind of might not completely create a comfortable place for people who I feel are really aggressive.
But that's just it. I mean, it's got to be a win-win, not just like in that moment, like the conversation that you're having, like, oh, I'm talking about something you're interested in too, but also like you're not just going out there looking for a job or looking for an interview or looking to get into a school or whatever it might be. Like, come to the table with something, you know? That's what I mean. It's got to be a win-win. And what I think people should do is before they go to a networking event, like if you're going to a specific event, you know there's going to be a networking moment, like there's a cocktail or it's an MBA fair or something like that. You know there's a moment specifically designated for networking. I'm not talking about day-to-day networking opportunities, which there are. Like literally every day is an opportunity to network. Like you end up on a train next to somebody, you strike up a conversation and, oh, they've got a fascinating career or they're from the same region of the country as you or whatever it may be. And you have this rapport and that could be a networking. But I'm talking about like scheduled networking events. And you should like sit down and if it helps, you could write, but at least think to yourself, what are some things you have going on these days? What are some projects you're working on? What are some skills you have? What are some books you've read recently? Some apps or websites that you're familiar with that might be interesting? Just kind of have like a stock of things that you can talk about. First of all, you'll be ready to just talk in so many different conversations, different topics, right? But also when you start talking to somebody and they mention, oh, like, you know, I'm looking for a web developer, and like, oh, I have like an intern that does that. And they're looking for extra work. Boom, you have something you can offer. And that's what I mean, win-win. Like you're not just going to the event like, God, I hope I meet somebody that's going to get me a job. Like you have things to offer other people. And that's so much classier than just like, you know, that's what I mean. A lot of people feel a little bit creepy, a little bit like, I don't know, salacious, like going to a networking event because they feel like they're just trying to get something, like they're like almost tricking somebody. But it's not about that. If you come to the table with things to offer, you'll A, never feel that way. And B, you're much more likely to have a win for yourself too, because somebody who feels they're gaining something from that interaction is much more likely to A, keep in touch with you and B, follow up with, you know, what they may have offered, whether it be a connection or an introduction via email, who knows?
I think it feels so good to give, right? It feels so good to be altruistic and to help someone out. Like it just, like it's such a naturally yummy feeling that when we do that for other people, it's, you know, one of the largest networking groups in the world is called BNI, and Business Networking International. And like their motto is givers gain, right? It's not about what you take, it's about what you give. And eventually things catch up with you, right? So if you're someone who's constantly giving, you're going to be the person that someone thinks of because you've helped them out. And obviously business, you know, BNI is a very specific kind of networking organization, but it is a place where people can get practice, you know, and it is a place like how, you know, I'll ask both of you, how do you practice networking, or how did you practice networking when you first started in the business sort of ecosystem? You remember? Do you remember?
Yeah, I can go for it. Like, so I would say that if you don't give, you don't get.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Yeah.
And actually, there is a term for what you all mentioned. It's like pitch slapping. You don't want to
Oh,
pitch
wow.
slap somebody on LinkedIn or elsewhere. But I remember, like, see, I would be one of those people who would say that it was pretty awkward in the beginning when I started, and I was someone who didn't know how to make the small talk or ease into somebody else's books. But then, as you said, Bara, the main idea here would be to find the connection. And you know, when you know your purpose, for instance, you know, it makes it all the more easier for you to talk about it. And then, for example, if you're going to an MBA networking event, you would want to show like why you're interested in the program or why you're interested in the MBA. How is it going to advance your career and those kind of things? And you would want to look for things that connect you to the other person. And once you do that, and once you realize that, yeah, like, you know, and typically at a networking event, both parties are looking for something. So if you have something to offer, they also have something to give you back.
Mm-hmm.
So I think searching for that connection would be the first step.
Mm. You asked Bara about like where to practice. You guys familiar with Lunch Club?
I don't know Lunch Club. I don't know if we have that.
Yeah, I heard about this from a friend like during COVID. I'm pretty sure it started before COVID. It really blew up because people were isolated. And Lunch Club, the whole concept is you make a profile about yourself, the things that you're into, your education, career, and so forth, hobbies. And then you kind of like can also make a profile for the kind of person you're looking to interact with, things you want to learn about, things you're interested and curious about. And you could set it up so that you can select people, or you can have the system, the algorithm, do it and match you up with somebody randomly. And they'll send you a reminder once a week, like, oh, do you want to have a lunch club meeting today? And I did it like 3 or 4 times. It was pretty cool. Like I met a university professor in Germany. I met this guy working on like this big tech project in Chicago, like really interesting people. And you can set it for like, I think 20 minutes, 30 or 45, whatever you're comfortable with. And it's just a way to meet somebody totally new and make a connection. And what usually ends up happening is like, well, you want to like connect on LinkedIn so we can stay in touch. So that like grows your network there. But it's a great opportunity to practice networking online, which presents its own challenges. Like you have to think about like eye contact and lighting and camera angle and background and all that kind of stuff. Hope you like mine. And like you guys have chosen to go for the blur background. So just things to think about, choices you want to make to set the tone and to set the kind of impression that you want to make. But it's a really great opportunity to practice. And I think online networking is very difficult for some people because they're just not used to it. In the beginning of COVID, like everyone was doing videos like this, and it was like pretty awful. And I think a lot of people got a lot better at doing something that looks and sounds better. Actually forgot to pop in my earbuds today, but anyway, that usually definitely helps with sound quality rather than having like echo in the room. But anyway, in-person networking, I think, is also really stressful because like you can't hide. I think sometimes people feel a little bit safer behind a computer screen. Like if ever things go wrong, they could just pretend they had a power outage and just close the screen. But in person, like you're somewhere maybe foreign, you're in a new hotel, maybe it's a really big space with loads of people, maybe it's small and there's just like only 3 or 4 other people there and you don't feel like you connect with them. And I get it. Like I was a pretty timid kid actually, and it took years of growing up basically and building self-confidence and trying to talk to different people, and you realize that we're all just people. And if you're, shy or more on the introverted side, that's when it's really great to prepare a couple things to say in advance. So you know what to talk about. Like I would always say, like, read the paper before you head out. Like just be up on a couple of current events. Like maybe avoid some really sensitive topics, but like, you can know like who won the latest football game, who won the latest Oscar. I mean, anything like music and sports is pretty film. Usually it's pretty easy to talk about. Obviously politics and religion can be a little bit dicier, but if you know your audience, then go for it, But what I really wanted to say is if you're, you don't want to only network when you're looking for something. I feel like at that point, it's a bit too late. Like you want to be networking on an ongoing basis so that when you're actually at the point you do need something, you already have developed that network. It's not like, oh, I'm going to this event with the expectation that I'm going to land a job. Think about it in the context of an MBA program, right? Like you're there for a year, perhaps 2 years, depending on what school, what country you're in. And there's networking events throughout that year, just for exactly that point. So you can get to know lots of alumni, corporate partners, people in your industry that could be the link that leads to an interview and eventually a job. And so you want to be networking on an ongoing basis, all the while like bringing things to the table, saying like, oh, I could do this. Oh, I'm interested in this. Like these are the things that I could potentially offer all of these people as you meet them throughout the year or 2 years. And then at some point, hopefully that juju comes back to you, that energy, all those, that positive, that giving spirit. What's the expression you said, Bara? Giving is what?
Well, the BNI uses giver's gain, but Krithika also had a really good saying. What did you say?
If you don't give, you don't get.
I mean, it's
right.
true.
So I would say that, like, as you mentioned, now there is like so many of possibilities of connecting over LinkedIn and other means on social media as well. Do you think it's okay to contact AdCom over LinkedIn? Is it a yes or a no?
The admissions committee for an MBA or master's program that you're applying to, is it okay to connect with them? I mean, my take is, you should ask them. Like usually you would meet them first at an MBA fair perhaps, or a lot of times they'll like webinars or some kind of online coffee chats or something like that. And you can ask them. And a lot of times they'll put their, at the end, there'll be like a contact sheet with like either their email, or it might be a generic email that's like, ambitions@xschool.com.edu. But ask them, would it be all right to connect on LinkedIn? And I think, everyone has their own preferences about that. Particularly if they're admissions, there may be policies about that. Like they don't have the right to connect with candidates because they don't want to be perceived as biased. So just keep that in mind. It's not personal, probably. But it never hurts to ask, And if they say no, say, okay, no worries, I understand.
I think that's a really good practice. I think that some people are accessible and some people aren't. And sometimes there's rules. And so I think a lot of the networking, you just don't want to take personally. It's really a process of, you can remind an adcom of someone that they adore or that they don't like, and that can impact the connection that you have with them in the moment, but it's not personal. Like their liking you isn't necessarily personal because they're just getting a little taste of who you are in the world. And you're only giving just a little bit of who you are. And obviously you want to give a good impression, and someone who's self-aware and evolved will be like, oh, that's triggering because X, right? They might know, but we're all human and we all come to interacting with people at different levels of our own self-awareness. So, I don't want to get heavy deep here, but, there's more than just the surface of what's happening when you are networking. And so to understand that you can take it seriously, but you don't want to take it too seriously. You can learn from what's happening and you can always get better, and you might make mistakes, but embracing a growth mindset and say, next time I'm going to overcome talking about doom and gloom in the world. Maybe I'll talk about something really positive, right? Like maybe I won't talk about those controversial things happening, or maybe, maybe I'll have that list, like you said, of movies or sports or, theater instead of, something like some horrific event that's happened in the world. Like, bonding over what our world and the chaos looks like might not always be the best way to connect.
Yeah. Doom and gloom is not very happy. Attractive, right?
But food and wine can win always.
What was that, Krithika?
Food and wine can always win. Food and beverages of your choice.
Oh, big
Coffee,
time.
wine. Always a good place to start. Which just brings me to another thing. Like people think that networking can wait once you reach B school, but don't you agree that networking is something that you have to start the very first thing, even before you start your MBA application journey?
100%. I mean, I have my friend from Washington, D.C. staying with me here in Paris with her son. He's 16. He's in high school. He's looking at engineering school. 17 years old, junior in high school, looking at engineering schools for college. And I made him make a LinkedIn then. Like he did it. And like he's, that's like not that it's a regret because LinkedIn didn't exist when I was 17. But, what an advantage to have started even younger. I didn't know anything about networking and the power that it holds. And, like I have always heard since I was a kid, like it's not what you know, it's who you know. And obviously you need to know things. You can't just walk in with an empty head and be like, get a job as, CEO. But who you know really helps, leveraging relationships. And that's something else I was going to say is that like leveraging existing relationships, like in other words, if you go to an event that is a networking event, if you're able to say to person X, it's like, hey, I heard you know Johnny also. Oh, no way. I mean, like a shared contact, a pre-existing relationship that you have in common with somebody is the highest predictor in a longer lasting relationship coming out of that networking event. Like they're much more likely to stay in touch with you because they're going to follow up as like, oh, guess who I met, and they're going to have a laugh or whatever. Hopefully it's all positive. And, it's a much stronger bond. They're much more likely to keep in touch because there's that triangulation between the three of you. So you definitely want to keep that in mind. And like something I've heard, like, on LinkedIn, you can actually see who's connected to who quite easily in most cases. And so if you have a networking event, again, we're talking about scheduled events. If you have an event coming up and you have the attendance list, look on LinkedIn, see who's coming that you might already know or have in common. And you might not have a person in common, but maybe you're both from the same town or state or went to the same college. And so, oh, like Mrs. Smith, whatever. Okay. Oh, she also went to Hofstra University. Awesome. Like me too. Like I graduated in 99. When did, well, you don't want to be too quite inquisitive about the dates, depending on how old people are. But you know what I mean, right? Like having things in common is like a much more likely chance that you're going to keep in touch and build something, significant and authentic.
It's typically also a spark, right? Like it typically feels really good. Last night, I mean, I always check if I'm wanting to meet someone, I always check on LinkedIn and on Facebook to see if I know them. Facebook, I'm pretty religious about it being a personal thing, not professional per se, even though I let people know professional stuff on there. And last night there was someone I went to high school with, and there was a friend of mine in the Bay Area who's now in Hawaii. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's amazing. They know each other. I have no idea how that crossover could have happened. I'm super curious how they know one another, right? So
Right.
That kind of spark for me is typically delightful, and that feels good. Like it feels good when you have people in your life who know one another or are meeting people who might know one another.
I love that.
And when I have gatherings, like before COVID, when I used to have gatherings and different groups of my friends would come together, it was just for me, it was super exciting. And for my friends, it was super exciting. And even business people that get to know each other through me, I found to be, super interesting. That giver's gain again, right? So being able to be a resource for people to make their lives easier. We all want our lives to be easier, and effective.
100%.
So one common thing that you hear from people is, what if I'm an introvert? Or if I'm shy by nature? Like, so do I get to network with others equally? Do I get to experience the same bonds? Or am I at a disadvantage? So what are some tips that you would want to share with the introverted or the shy people?
All right. I'll kick it off a little bit if that's okay. So first of all, I just want to separate the two. Being shy and being an introvert are definitely not the same thing, in my opinion. For me, people who are shy are timid and have an apprehension about speaking to other people, especially strangers or maybe in large groups. Whereas introverts, these are just people who recharge their batteries by spending time alone. So it's not really the same thing, but at least that's how I understand it. And I also do not believe that people are either introverts or extroverts. I think it's all, a spectrum. And I think at different times in our life, at different times of the day, we might be more introverted or extroverted. And that's great to have balance. That said, if you're more on the introvert side of the spectrum, or if you're more timid, more shy, the good news is that the skills of networking are trainable. And a lot of the things we're talking about today, and it really mostly comes down to preparation. Taking time to take stock of what you can offer. What are you about? What skills you have? What jobs you've done? What schools you've gone to? What you're interested in? Who that kind of stuff, and just take stock. And then also external things like taking stock of current events, news, sports, arts, and having things prepared to say, so you're not just frozen with nothing, right? But it's something that you will need to train, because if you're going to be a leader in business successfully, you need to be able to speak in front of people. You need to be able to talk confidently and clearly to people. That's just how it is. I think there are many business leaders. I know that there are many successful business leaders who define themselves more as introvert, and yet they need to push through whatever is a little bit less natural for them to communicate and to make connections, because that is how the world works. That is how jobs are obtained. That is how interviews are succeeded. And that's something that you'll need to do. And you can.
I'll say something. I want to sort of tag on the opposite bookend of that, which is that I think that a great networker is someone who, when seeing someone who's an introvert or seeing someone who's shy, creates a softer landing for them, and there's this kind of rapport that can be made, so that you can gauge how you want to be with that person. It is a response. I often talk about, taking standardized tests. It's a dance, right? This is all it's a dance. And so if you go in and it's like you've got your steps down and you're going to do those steps with whoever you are dancing with, you can do those steps, but how are you going to do that? And so even being a great networker, even if you're not introverted or you are introverted, really, how do you build the rapport? Like, how do you meet the person where they're at? And if you're not someone, and noticing that if someone does feel more soft-spoken, takes more pause, to give them that space, to create the environment so that they feel comfortable. So it's sort of a bookend to what you're saying, Eric. I think that networking is not just like
Totally.
moving forward and what you're putting out. It's also what you're taking in and creating that space. And that's also something to practice. And you can look at your friends.
What you said about listening, it's very much to what you said about listening and reading the room. And, you're not just offering a service, but in terms of like a professional service, but also being comforting and being an ear. And that's all part of building relationships, all part of soft skills. And yeah, sure, if you see somebody who's kind of standing off by themselves, I mean, maybe they want to be by themselves at the moment. They're just like, checking a text message or just taking a breath. But if somebody seems to not be mixing with anyone for a while, maybe they're struggling. And that's great if you can do that, not just be like a shark looking for opportunity that's going to benefit you, but you're there for the whole group to benefit. Love it.
I think also what's really lovely in a networking situation is to not dominate, so that if you're at a fair and there's other people there, to be inclusive, to not, one of the pet peeves I have in social circles is when one person is talking and they're talking to someone else and you feel excluded from the conversation. And I do notice at fairs that can sometimes happen because there's so much, people want to dominate the AdCom's time and they want to be seen and they want to be, but I think that there's something really gracious about saying, hey, like we're all excited to talk to you. I'm not sure what they're here about. I'll ask my question. I'm like, like to create like that kind of ringmaster to a certain extent, not quite ringmaster, but someone who really brings in other people, or you're not just so focused on that one person and giving space for other people. Because I think that sort of bullyish way of being can come across in a not positive way.
Listen, Bara, I totally agree with you. And let me just tell you, there is a cultural dimension to this kind of behavior. Like, I'm American, right? Now I'm in France for 12 years. I'm French now, whatever, but I'm American. Let's be honest. And I totally resonate with what you just said. Like, that makes sense to me. I think it's more inclusive. I think it's just basic courtesy, but it's not the case in certain countries, right? And it's not just at networking events, like at a bar or at like some place in the street, and like people sometimes in certain countries will engage and like lock eyes one-to-one and not even acknowledge the other person standing there for like 5-10 minutes. I'm like, wow. Like, and it's not like they're being rude to them in their culture. Right. So, I mean, there's nothing you can do about other people's culture. What you can control is how you perceive that and how you react to it.
Yeah.
So just taking stock, like, am I in a multicultural environment, or maybe is this person not from my culture? Maybe they're not trying to be rude to me, but this is the norm from where they're from. Just as a side note to keep that in mind. But yeah, it's frustrating when you're
That's super important. That's a really super important point to make. And some people might be from another culture and not even aware that this other norm is there, or they might actually not respect that kind of norm, or it's seen as, in some way weakening or not. Like, I mean, we don't, I don't know. So I often feel like a New Yorker in California or a California person in New York, right? Like, depending on where I am. And I'm always struck in New York that it's so dense that there's much more fluidity with happenstance and synchronicity that happens, because it's just, you're just on top of other people all the time. Whereas in California, it's easier to be spacious and friendly. And, some people will say that that's not necessarily authentic, right? So who are you authentically? And the more aware you are of other cultures, ultimately, is going to be better in a business stance anyway. Like, even if, what do you do in that 5 to 10 minutes that you're mentioning, Eric? Like, what do you do if you're sitting there waiting? And, do you have the compassion and empathy that this person actually doesn't?
a really good question. Like, are you supposed to insert yourself into the conversation, or you be seen as weak? Are you supposed to keep quiet? Otherwise, you're seen as rude. I don't know. Like, especially in the context of MBA fairs or being in business school, it's very multinational, and if you're talking to, if you're at the table of a school from a country that's other than your own, you're kind of like in their territory, right? You're on their, like if you're talking to Bocconi at a QS fair in, I don't know, in London, you're like on a little island of Italy at that MBA fair. And, just be aware that there's different cultural norms. I don't know, Kritika, I'm sure you've experienced this a lot, like India compared
Yeah,
to.
so what I would add is, I would just add that is again a way for someone to understand what global mindset would look like,
Mhm.
and how to even like interact in a multicultural environment, which might not be the case for many. And I think that part of it is something that you can learn by actually mirroring others who are standing, because the very first time if you're going to such a fair and you don't know what's happening, so that's one way for people to learn from each other and mirror from each other. And I would say, Bara, to your point that your network is your net worth, because ultimately that's what it is in the business world, especially if you want to be an entrepreneur later on and things like that. So one other tip that I would probably want to share with people from different culture and who are going to other schools is to as you said, to go prepared for it. There's nothing like it, like, you just have to go prepared a little bit about it. I have come across many MBA fairs where, as you say, Eric, there are people from the US, people from France, and other school representatives. Sometimes even the tone of voice that you use and the way that you ask the question
Mhm.
might come across as rude, or as like
Aggressive.
being impolite and things like that. So I would say that going prepared and understanding these nuances is a way to start building your network in the right way.
100%.
So
You know,
Eric, on the note, like, shall we end with stories? Tell us stories on a good networking story that stood out for you.
oh, well, actually, I wanted to ask you a question, Kritika.
Hmm.
Coming from India, what do you think about business cards?
They are, I think, they are out of fashion right now.
Okay.
Um, but there was a time, I should tell you that, there was a time where people would print their LinkedIn. You have the codes from LinkedIn, right? So you could do the the QR codes
Hmm.
of your LinkedIn profile, and they would actually put it on a business card kind of a thing and then share it. But I think that that's not a norm anymore. But I do like, I do see people having fancy business cards, but they don't like exchange any business cards. It's just like probably tapping your phone
Hmm.
for your WhatsApp or your LinkedIn profile, a QR code these days.
I mean, what I see at MBA fairs is most schools, those school reps do have business cards, and even for the alumni, actually, like during MBA programs, people that are students in a program, the school often make up business cards. It will say, current MBA student at such and such school. Also at the fairs, whether they're one-to-one or they're kind of traditional fairs where you can circulate freely, usually everyone has a badge and the school reps have this kind of device you can tap. So all the information is transmitted this way digitally anyway, but people still seem to like the cards. Another thing I'd say is, like, besides bringing your resume to the MBA fairs, which is super helpful, even if you've uploaded to the system, a lot of people will bring cards as well. I wouldn't say it's the majority, but some people do. I mean, if your company's printed cards for you anyway, you want to use them, it definitely doesn't hurt. It could definitely help yourself be more memorable as somebody a bit unique, because as you said, it's kind of passe. There could be, on the other hand, like feedback about, oh, business cards are not ecological. It's like the cost of printing, the energy, the ink, all that kind of stuff. And then are they actually being recycled? Who knows? On the other hand, as you mentioned, digital cards, like, it's been around for a long time. I don't know the name of the technology. Maybe it's Bluetooth, or there's another technology I can't think of, but you can just essentially tap two phones together and it transmits the contact. Or something I've seen in more recent years, the last like year or two, it's this kind of like hard plastic credit card looking thing that has all this stuff in there. It's more than, phone number and email. It's like your Instagram and your LinkedIn and website, and you could put
Mhm.
whatever you want on that thing, and you could brand it with like logos, and it's super fancy. And you just basically have this one card in your wallet, and you could tap any phone and it works. And that's very cool. The thing is, I feel like there's a limit to how much we're going to retain. Like, am I going to really remember this person if it was as simple as that? If you simplify the process, and I'm not physically touching a piece of paper, okay, this is plastic, but you get the point. If I'm not physically touching something, there's something about tactile memory. There's something about putting that thing in my wallet. There's something about every time I pay for a coffee at Starbucks, oh, I'm seeing that card time and time again. There's something about seeing it folded up on my desk for a couple of months before I finally throw it out. All that repetition is reinforcing the memory of that person, you know? So just this one boop, it's easy, but is it really, am I really going to think about that person when I could do that 10,000 times in a week and not remember anyone? So I don't know if paper business cards are totally unuseful or useless.
I don't know what the Gen Z have to say about that.
We can ask. I mean, like, or, you know, I mean, I'm just bringing up a few different perspectives. You know, from an ecological perspective, it's not, you know, very good. Maybe there's other solutions to, you know, some of these business cards, they have like a really fancy embossed kind of plastic coating on them. Like, that's clearly not good. It's not recyclable unless it's some kind of plant-based plastic. That's my biggest concern. Like, what are we doing to the planet? As far as are they cool or not, I really don't care. You know, if somebody wants to give me a business card, great. If I want to keep it, I will. If I not, chuck it, recycle it. But I do think there's something to be said about being more memorable. And like I said, if your company's printing them up anyway, you have them on you, great. Bring them to the fair. No one's going to criticize you for that. So, but what I would say is more important is LinkedIn. I mean, those of you who watch MBA Waves regularly know that I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn, and I think it's an amazing tool, and it's a necessary tool for applying to university, masters, and certainly MBAs. Like, this is not only going to give you so much information and connect you with so many people who are going to be essential in your journey when you're researching the programs, it also sends a signal outward about you that A, networking is important to you, B, you know how to do it, and C, look at the people that you know that are connected to either that school or the competitor school. You know, those schools are also in competition for top talent like you. So, I mean, it's so many reasons it's useful and important. And I think it's very healthy to A, download the app to your phone. B, check it as often as you check your Instagram. And if you think that's too much, then you check your Instagram probably too much. Or TikTok, fill in the blank, the latest app. And C, like, develop the habit of asking people at the end of nearly any conversation that's interesting or professional to say, hey, develop that habit to ask after having a good conversation with somebody, would it be okay to connect on LinkedIn? And I think it's a pretty non-threatening way to get somebody's contact information and maintain contact without like asking for someone's phone number, or can I, you know, WhatsApp is great. I also love WhatsApp, but in this case, you're asking for someone's phone number. And for some people that might be too personal, too invasive. Whereas like LinkedIn, I think it's the right tone. Like the platform has successfully maintained, I think, the right kind of tone and messaging for keeping in contact professionally. And, you know, if people are posting things on LinkedIn that are kind of inappropriate, either because they're ridiculous and silly or they're inappropriate for other reasons, like, you'll get called out and it will be flagged and pulled down. Whereas Facebook is a little bit more wild, for example. Does that still exist, Facebook? So yeah.
I think only for people and businesses.
Yeah.
People beyond 40 and businesses.
Well, that's me, first of all. But you mentioned a couple of good lines or quotes. Or one thing I like to say is, the better you treat your network, the better it treats you. And if you like, it's plays into the same themes that you guys were speaking about. If you know, offer things, if you give, it comes back, you know? So, Krithika, you want to talk about stories?
I wanted to hear stories, of course, but I wanted to say that, you know, if you keep it as transactional and more like a barter exchange, then it's going to feel exactly that. And adcoms and even other people can smell it from a mile away. So they would want to, like, you know, run away from you. So they know that, hey, this person is going to come. And you can always find the person who is the swag collector in every MBA fair. So you don't want to be that person.
Yeah. No, authenticity goes a long way. I mean, people are not stupid. They can smell if they're being sold something. They can tell if somebody just wants something from them. They might not get it right away. They might not express it right away, but they'll know. and they'll just feel uncomfortable. Usually it feels sleazy. And that's why I said, if networking makes you feel sleazy, you're probably doing it wrong. That's why I keep insisting on come to the table with something you can offer, and it's not about being fake. It's not about, I think it's for me, the first thing at the first level is just to feel comfortable. Like if going to a networking event stresses you out and you're nervous because you're not going to know it, you don't know what to say, well, think of what you want to say and problem solved. And if you have to, make a couple of notes in your phone. Phones are great for that. Like you just in your notes, just like 5 bullet points of things. And then like, if you get like stuck like a deer in headlights, you don't know what to say, just like, how about those Jets? That's a football team in New Jersey, if you don't know. Anyway, but yeah, preparation. It's all about that. What you got, Bara? I see you smiling.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that idea of transactional. Like no one likes to be on either side of that. And I'm also thinking about, that this, what did you call them? Like swag hounds, swag collect anteaters.
Swag collector.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that at the end of a fair, that people actually do want to get rid of their swag because they actually don't want to bring it back with them. So if you did want to take, the latest pens and memory sticks and water bottles, that at the end, that's a good time to do it. And also, if you do feel awkward and uncomfortable, you can also be really honest about it. Like, wow, like I'm not used to going to these networking events. What's the benefit, to the person you're talking? Like, what's a benefit for you in coming to this, or to other people you meet there? Like, what's your winning formula for these networking events? Like you can actually have that human experience of like, wow, this is kind of strange for me. I've been feeling a little out of place. I want to be authentic, but this is kind of a contrived situation. I mean, you don't need to bare your soul, but you can also be really real with who you are and what's happening for you in that moment, And so I think that we all get warm and fuzzy when someone's being authentic, whatever that is. So
totally, I think it's a bold move, right? But if you've got the jitters at a networking event and you're feeling, timid or like a deer in headlights, I mean, having the courage to admit that is amazing. Like putting yourself out there, being that kind of vulnerable. I think it's probably easier in a one-to-one situation. Like if you walk up to a table, you're at X business school's table and you're one-to-one and you're not hiding it because you're maybe stuttering, your palms are sweating, maybe you're trembling a bit in your hands. Rather than trying to hide it, being authentic is going to make them respect you because you have the courage to be honest. They'll probably trust you more because you've already opened up about something. It's probably not easy. And I think just by the act of saying it kind of takes that pressure off yourself. And suddenly that pressure goes away by being honest. It's like therapy, talking about it makes it easier. So that's one approach for sure. But I think it is a bold move.
Yeah, and you're not going to be not nervous ever. You should feel those butterflies in your stomach because it is supposed to be a little stressful. You are supposed to, and I think that's like a good kind of stressful, wherein you are going because it's something like a new adventure for you and you're trying something new. And I think that's the way that you have to look at it. So, Eric, on with your story.
A story. I didn't have a story prepared. I have to think about it for a second. If someone else has another story, please go ahead. A networking story.
I don't specifically have a networking story, but I will say that because I was involved with BNI for a really long time, one of the ways that it was really encouraged to network is to actively spend time with people, even if they don't look like allied professionals, right? Like, what if it's not someone that you can specifically, share clients? Because we all have that human experience. And the more that you take the opportunity to listen again and to be authentic and to present yourself, you wind up finding that there's so many points of connection between so many people all the time. And so, obviously this is a business school vidcast, but we really are all having a human experience. And so you can always connect with someone on a human level. And even if it doesn't look overtly like you can, like someone who you might not share political, cultural things with, there's actually, we're having a human experience. And most of us are wanting happiness, and most of us want good for the world. And so really, finding the points of connection, even with people that don't seem similar to you, I think is a valuable lesson.
Nice.
But I don't have a story offhand.
All right, I thought of a story. It's kind of random. Okay, so at this point in Paris, I've been living there for about 2-3 years. I was working at Sciences Po, and Sciences Po is like one of the top schools for like political science and sociology and this kind of stuff. And the way the contract worked, it ended. And I was trying to get it extended, but it was a complicated moment because the president of the school actually had passed away, and it was just nobody was like working on this project of like this new department they created for me to work in of international student services. So my job went away, and it just so happens to be that like 2 weeks later was this fair, this like basically a college fair. It's called the Salon de Grandes Écoles. And it's like this big deal. It's all the top schools in France. And like, it's basically this huge college fair. And it's, designed for people who were like 17 to maybe 22 who are going around to find their future school. And me, I was like, this is a networking opportunity. I work in academia. And so I got my CV ready, my resume ready. And, I was ready to talk about the two sides of my profile. One side, which was kind of like always been in recruitment, admissions, headhunting, sales, marketing, that kind of side. And the other side, which is in like student life and leadership development, events, international students, all this kind of stuff, like on the campus kind of stuff. And so I was ready to talk about those two kind of things. And I knew of two schools in advance that would be there. One was HEC, the other one was ESSEC. And there was a bunch more I didn't know, but I went around and I talked to about 20 schools. And wouldn't you know it, like 2 weeks later, I get a call from the director of recruitment at ESSEC, and I had a job there. So I was basically unemployed for about 5-6 weeks. And I made that event, which was really designed for students to find their school. For me, it was a networking event. And so I guess to my point, anything can be a networking event if you want it to be, and when you have that fire under your butt to get a job and, pay the rent or the mortgage or whatever it may be, you're motivated to make that happen for you. Anyway, do you have a networking story, Krithika?
I should say the one with Bara. So Bara was one of the first, literally the first person that I met when I went, for my very first conference at AGAC. As you all know, AGAC is the professional organization and the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants. And that's how I met Bara. And she was there and she was genuinely interested. And I think I still remember, I don't remember the exact conversation, but I remember the warmth that we shared. And here we are, like, I think 7 years later, sharing this episode. And I think that's the kind of power that networking brings, because I always know that there is somebody like that who shares similar values. And of course, later on, I know that she's an alum from UMich. So all the more, all the more power. So, but one thing I want to say is, in case, and I should say that thanks to Bara, I got to know everybody else, at the table the other day, because she made it a point to introduce me to everybody else. And it was so easy to just connect with everyone. So I would say that, it's always easy to find a champion for yourself, even if you are either introverted or shy, or you're nervous and you're not your usual self. You would want to find somebody who can help you to connect with the others. So, and that is also okay. Like, so for example, if you find it so hard to go to a networking event, why don't you go with somebody who is more connected than you and who can also make those connections for you?
Yeah.
So that is also great, I think. Yeah. But yeah, thanks to a networking event, here we are after 7 years.
So nice. I love that story. That's so cool. I just remember Krithika brought me at one of the events. She brought me this like totally adorable little purse from India, and for years, I used it a lot. And so for years, like that was like I would take it out with my dogs, and so like I got to think of her when I was on these walks, which was really fun. So, like,
that's really sweet that you guys met that way. And I love that here we are together. It's really cool. And we've brought this up also a few times on MBA Waves. Bara and I have never met in person. It's 2 years now. We've been talking to each other at least once a week. And I can't
usually more.
Krithika, your story also reminded me of that great Maya Angelou quote where she says, at the end of the day, people won't remember what you said. They'll remember how they made you feel. And you were saying how you don't remember what the conversation was, but you had all the feels, right? Like you and Bara just like clicked. And I guess I'll end with this. Like if you're worried about saying the wrong thing, it doesn't really matter because they're not going to remember exactly what you said. They'll remember how you made them feel. So it's all about connection. And if you can make people feel good, and I don't mean being a clown and putting on a show, but make people feel comfortable and that you care and are not just there for yourself, then you're going to make a good impression and the rest is cake. The rest is easy. Anyway, guys, if you like this episode, give us a thumbs up at the bottom of the screen and subscribe for more great episodes of MBA Waves. We're going to sign off today. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Hi.
Bye-bye.